Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today's video, it's going to be the first of a series that I have of going through and building an AR-15 from beginning to end. Really kind of wanted to show how easy and simple it is to do, as long as you have the knowledge, the tools, and the chemicals to do it correctly. This will be the third complete AR that I've done. I've built a few lowers. I've definitely replaced a lot of the smaller parts and handguards on uppers, but just from the third from start to finish that I've ever done. So I would consider myself I'm definitely no pro. I am a novice with experience. I think I know enough and have enough of the tools to be able to put out a video that would help somebody out who's looking to put one together for themselves. And I definitely see a lot of questions in the forums, in the different Facebook groups, people asking for, advice for different things. I did put out a video a few months ago about the basic tools that you should have and chemicals if you're going to put one together. Some of them are better than others. Some of them are, you could live without, I should say. They're kind of more of a nice to have, and some of them are definitely a must have. So I'll walk through those points as I go through these videos, and considering that, this will probably be a little bit of a lengthy one. This is why I'm breaking it into 3 different parts, in case somebody's not looking to build, they just want to do a lower, or they just want to do an upper, or they just want to go through the accessory mounting. So this will be the first of 3. I am going to start off with the upper receiver group. Next video I'll do the lower receiver group, and then lastly I'll go through bolting on the accessories. And then eventually, I'm sure once I get through this, I will and get it all together, I'll do a walkthrough of the complete rifle and why the purpose for it was built for, why it was built, why I chose some of the components, similar to what I've done in some of my other videos. So that stated, I'm not going to go too much into depth with the individual parts themselves, giving details about them. It's really going to be more so assembling the components. Some of the stuff is going to be, depending on which accessory you get, between a handguard. They come with different barrel nuts. Some of them use mil-spec barrel nuts. You may pick some other accessories. They may go together a little bit differently, like barrels and gas blocks and whatnot. But overall, it's going to give you a good overview of what it takes to put together an AR. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. And I think first off the bat, we should talk about all the components you need to build a upper receiver group. First and foremost, you need to have an upper receiver, come in different types of between forged and billet. This one here is just your standard mil-spec forged upper receiver. Of course, you're going to need a barrel of your choice. Along with that barrel, you are going to need a gas block. With this particular barrel itself, I chose the option to have a pin gas block. Some of them are pinned, some of them are simply screw-on, some of them are clamping. I'll talk about that a little more in depth as I go through the process. You got to have your gas tube. Make sure that you get the correct length for the gas system of the barrel that you got. In this case, this is a mid-length gas barrel. And I have a mid-length gas tube. They do come in different sizes, from pistol, carbine, mid-length, and rifle, along with some of the other proprietary ones. I know Roscoe makes one. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but that's basics. You got to have your ejection port cover. You got to have your forward assist. If your upper receiver has a forward assist. You got your bolt carrier group. And then you got your handguard, and then your barrel nut. So depending on the handguard that you choose will dictate the barrel nut that you're going to have. In this case, with this Midwest Industries Slimline, it does come with its own barrel nut. And then there's also a barrel nut tool or installation tool. So that is, I'm sorry, and I also forgot. So charging handle, well, that just kind of slips in. So that's it. That's the basic components of your upper receiver group. And to start off, I am going to go ahead and put in the ejection port cover and forward assist. So the ejection port cover consists of 4 separate pieces. Of course, you have the door itself. You've got your hinge pin, you've got your spring, and you've got your retaining little C-clip. These things here are definitely easy to lose. You want to keep a close eye on those. Put this guy over here. Typically, when you're getting brand new parts, they all come with a protective coating on them, a grease. So you give it a little bit of wipe down, get that off of there. I would say that the ejection port cover, it's probably one of the first things that I like to put on, because it is a lot easier to install when you don't have the barrel nut and the handguard on there, depending on the barrel nut you use. Because once you insert them, or it is easier to insert them from the front than it is the rear. I know some people think that you can't replace your ejection port cover while the barrel and the handguard installed. That's not accurate. I install mine all the time, usually the forward control design ones, without removing the barrel nut. It's a little bit trickier. So I'll say it's definitely a lot easier to do once when you have it with just a stripped receiver here. So first things first, like I mentioned, I'm going to wipe off some of the protective grease that's on there, but I am going to go ahead and take a little bit of gun grease, or I'm sorry, gun oil. You could use CLP, you could use whatever you want. In this case, I'm using Slip 2000. Just makes it a little bit easier to slide through there, plus adds on a protective surface. All right, so to start off, you're going to see on the hinge pin that one end of the pin has a groove on it, the other is not. The groove is for your retaining C-clip, so you want to make sure that that groove in your retaining or in your hinge pin is facing forward. You go ahead and get it started from the front. Line up your ejection port cover. And when you go to put in your screw, as you push it in, the long leg goes forward, the short spring goes in the back. So you can get that lined up, you can push it through. Now for me personally, I find that this is easier to do. I will push it all the way through and out past just about the end of the spring. So you see, once you have it lined up there, it is not under tension at all. And what you want to do is you need to turn this leg underneath and towards you in order to load it up. So depending on how much you pull that hinge pin back, and you're going to have to pull it back a little bit further, kind of like so. You're going to see it's kind of out of line with the hole in the receiver, but that's okay. And then you can grab it, and like I mentioned, you are going to take this long leg, oh, pull a little too far up. There you go. You're going to take this long leg and you're going to loop it underneath. Pull it towards, kind of pivot it up. You could do this with a pair of pliers if it's easier for you. Needle nose pliers. Make sure you don't bend it too much so to where you actually bend the metal and ruin it. Put that long leg against the cover, like so. And then go ahead and push your hinge pin back through. And before you secure it, make sure that it opens and does what it's supposed to do. As you can see, it does. When you push it shut, the detent in the ejection port cover engages with the receiver itself. And then once you work the bolt carrier group, it pushes it open by the physical touching of it itself. So I will say that depending on the ejection port cover that you get, sometimes these are a lot stiffer. I know with like the forward controls design ones that I've installed in the past, they were really stiff. Like you felt like something's wrong. They actually warn you on the website about them, but that's gonna be normal. It'll wear in. So as long as you know that your spring is loaded correctly, that's what it should look like. You know that you're good to go ahead and install your retaining C-clip, and we'll move on to that next. Now, depending on how large or small your hands are or your fingers are, it may be a little easier or harder to get this retaining C-clip on there. I don't have huge hands, but I also have very poor fine motor skills. So to make this a lot easier for me, I always use a pair of tweezers. Just go ahead and grab onto the back of it. Sometimes this can be a little bit tedious. Take a couple times of it popping off. You're just gonna get it lined up in the groove. And that's all that you really need to do. And then I will use the aid of a punch or an Allen key. Let me see here, my toolkit. Here I've got a small little punch. Once you get it lined up with the groove, these things do have a tendency to go flying when you try to push them down. So just have a little bit of patience. You might even want to have a couple spares. I know I bought a box of these C-clips on Amazon a while back for cheap, just typically because if you're changing your ejection port cover, sometimes they can break. But once you have it locked into the groove, let's see if the camera See it? You just push it down with a punch or an Allen key or whatever you may want to use to make sure that it's secured all the way down around that groove, which you can see here that it is. So that's it. First easy thing down. Ejection port cover installed. Let's go ahead and move on to the forward assist. All right, so moving on to installing the forward assist. Does comprise of 3 components. Having the forward assist assembly itself, you have the spring, and then you have the roll pin that holds it in. So for these operations, you're definitely going to want to have the receiver stabilized somehow. In this case, I am going to be using a Magpul bev block that I have secured down here with my simple $25 drill press vise that I picked up from Harbor Freight that is now C-clamped down to my desk that I have in my room here. So simply slides on here to the bev block. You have a pin that picks up the front pivot pin. Then you will take your bolt carrier group that has the bolt, firing pin, and cam pin removed. You're going to insert it from the back. Now, there is a little bit of an O-ring on here that keeps it secure, which I'm going to need 2 hands to do this, so let me go ahead and put my camera back up. Okay, so once you have the receiver on there, you have it pinned. You're going to push it in, just give it a little bit of a tap, and then there you go. You've got it secured. So, okay, so now moving on to the installation part of it. Like I mentioned with the ejection port cover, this does have some pretty heavy preservative grease on there. So me personally, I like to clean it off with some COP before I install it. So I went ahead and did that. Before you even get this in, you definitely want to get the roll pin started into the receiver itself. I'm gonna go ahead and reposition the camera and back it up a little bit because I see that there is some blurriness. Okay, so when you look at the forward assist here, you're going to notice that there's a flat spot on it right there. If the camera can pick it up, that's the side that you want towards your roll pin. It slips into the upper receiver like so. One of the things that can help you is flat spot in, roll pins up. Once you put it in, the roll pin is going to engage it like so. And I think I'm probably blocking the light from seeing it. It's going to slip in like so, and this will engage it like this. That being said, now installing the roll pin and getting that started first, me personally, I like to put the split away from the action or the surface that it's going to be rubbing against or working against. So in this case, I want the split facing in because like I mentioned, once this goes in, it's secured. This is going to be sliding or retaining the forward assist itself. So just to give me a little bit of help, make it a little bit easier, I'm going to go ahead and put a little spot of oil on the forward assist. I'm going to use some pliers to hold it. And then when you hammer this in, you definitely want to make sure whenever you're working on gun stuff and a hammer, you want to get one of these hammers that have the brass ends on it. If you use a standard steel one, you're going to put marks into the surface that you won't be able to get out. When you could put marks on here with the brass one, and you can kind of just rub them off by hand. So making sure that you have this orientated right. Go ahead and get your roll pin started. Just enough so that it's holding in. And I'm gonna go ahead and take the forward assist. Again, put the flat side this way, because that's the side that's going to engage the forward assist. All right, starting to engage that. I'm going to go ahead and move over to my roll pin punch. So good. All right, so wasn't really happy with the way that the upper receiver wasn't really super stable on the Magpul bev block. So I did go ahead and jump over to the Midwest Industries URR. This is a reaction rod. Very, very awesome tool to have. This is actually the first build that I have that I'll be using it. So just to go over quickly, anybody who's not familiar with reaction rods, your receiver slides over the top of it. These lugs up here engage the barrel lugs, and what's unique to the URR in comparison to the Geisley is it has this top fin that's once it slides in and engages the channel of the upper receiver and adds some more rigidity to it. So I'm going to go ahead and slide that on there, make this a little bit, definitely will be more stable. Let me go ahead and free up my camera hands. All right, so let's go ahead and finish off this roll pin. Just some light up in here. Oh yeah, much better. So it's in there, it's just about flush. Pull the receiver off. As you can see, it isn't quite protruding out the bottom yet. So when you get this flush, you can go just a little bit lower than the surface. And there you go. Forward assist, check the function. You can see it working inside the receiver. If I get the right camera angle there, that'll actuate on the bolt carrier group, and that's done. All right, so now that we have the ejection port cover behind us and the forward assist, it's time to go ahead and move on to the barrel. All right, so when you're getting ready to install the barrel, you want to get the gas block on there first. Depending on the choice of gas block that you go with, like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, you may have some that are simple, held on with set screws on the bottom here. You see these set screws have dimples or chamfers in them. This particular one that I got has the, it's been pinned. So you see there is a slot here, and when it goes onto the barrel, there is a groove that was cut into the barrel for that pin, so that when you slide your gas block on, you will line it up with that slot, and it ensures that this thing is not going to rotate or come off on you. This is considered the most secure way to put on a gas block. My 16-inch Noveski came pre-pinned also, but I will say that, you know, my 12.5-inch Criterion core was not. They do not. I had a separate gas block for it, and I'd watch videos that were published by Criterion, and they do say that set screws are fully capable of securing on a gas block. There are also the others that clamp onto it, so they may be split and have a sleeve to it, so that once you get them into position, you'll tighten down the screws and it'll essentially clamp on. I might be wrong here, somebody could probably correct me in the comments, but I do believe that that's probably the least secure way. So one thing about this is, even though it's been drilled for a pin, you are still going to put the set screws on there. And considering when you see these have flats on them instead of a point, you know, you could, if you wanted to be extra safe, go ahead and drill this up for dimples using a dimple jig and a drill. Basically, it sounds just like what it sounds like, or it is just what it sounds like. It would add a dimple for these set screws to sit on. Now, if you did not have a cross-drilled block like this, you would definitely want to dimple your barrel for your set screws. In this case, since it's already pinned, it's not really a necessary step. So I'm going to go ahead and work towards installing the gas block itself. One of the key things that you want to make sure before you install your gas block is you want to install your barrel nut, because your barrel nut will not go back on or slide over the gas block itself. So let me go ahead and grab that from the Handguard. So like I mentioned, some Handguards, they install with mil-spec barrel nuts. Some of them install with their own proprietary ones. In this case, the Midwest Industries one does have a proprietary nut, and there are definitely pros and cons of both of those. Having a proprietary nut and having a mil-spec nut. So we'll say that Handguards that do secure to a mil-spec barrel nut is a lot more secure. But I would say that with the design with Handguards that we have now, some of them with their pinch locks and whatnot, in addition to having anti-rotation tabs on them, they are plenty secure. So the barrel nut, as you see, is in the Handguard here. When I first got this, it was jammed up in there pretty good. When I read through the manual, let me go ahead and grab my receiver. One of the things they said that you could do if it was seized up in there is to rotate on your upper receiver a couple threads and then use that to pull it out. So little Definitely a tip by Midwest Industries, but figured I'd show that to you guys as well if you run into a similar situation and your handguard manual does not mention doing that. So again, before I put on the gas block, I do want to put on the barrel nut. You do want to make sure that you have it orientated the right way. As you see here, it's got the teeth for the barrel wrench tool that it did come with, the handguard did come with. Threads obviously towards the receiver. So you're just going to slide that on there and leave it on there loose while you get ready to install the gas block. So obviously it should go without saying, you want to make sure that you have your gas block oriented right. The tube is in the open end, and on the right, on the forward end, there is not a tube. So I don't think you could even install this the wrong way with the pin, but you could with the if you were using a just set screws only. So you simply slide it on. All right, now the barrel nut's on, I'm going to go ahead and start ready to install the roll pin and use my bench block here to make it a little bit easier. Similar to the installing the roll pin on the Ford Assist, I do want the split away from the barrel. This particular roll pin has been pinched on one end to make it a little easier to get started. So, and just like the gas block, I am going to get it started in the block itself before I move on to sliding on the barrel and then pushing it through. Sometimes it seems like it would be easier to have a extra pair of hands. All right, let's get it started. All right, so again, gas port going aft. Slide it on, find the groove in the barrel. We'll finish it off. All right, very good. Sometimes it helps to have something on the back end of the barrel to kind of lift the weight off. In this case, I'll just use the bev block. Find my punch. All right, looking good. So apparently I didn't hit the record button in the last segment that I did, but basically what I did is once I got the pin driven in, it went time to start securing the set screws. I just mentioned that torquing them to 25 inch-pounds, along with installing them with some thread locker. I know a lot of people, when it comes to gas blocks, they use rock set, especially with muzzle devices, because thread locker does break down with heat, and there's definitely a ton of heat that goes through the gas block. I've used this 271 to install a suppressor mount, and when I sold that gun, I took the suppressor mount off, and it was on there very, very good. So considering the fact that the gas block is pinned, I'm good with the 271, but point being is just when you install these screws in, make sure you use some type of thread locking device, thread locker. I know they make high temp thread locker or rock set, and that you torque them. Definitely a big fan of torque. This here being the Wheeler Fat Wrench. Whenever you're assembling an AR, they have torque values for almost everything. I know not everybody believes in torque values, but I am. So these are one of the tools that you're definitely going to want to have. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and torque down the barrel nut. One of the things when it comes to barrel to receiver fits is some receivers are what's called thermal fit. And what that means is the opening here to the receiver, it's actually very, very slightly undersized to the receiver extension here. Barrel extension. So if you try to just slip this in, it will not fit. It'll be too tight. And what you actually have to do is take a torch or a heat gun and heat up the upper receiver, because metal expands when it gets hot and contracts when it gets cold. And you heat it up just for a few seconds, enough to slide the barrel in. As you see here, this one is not a thermal fit. I know some people, really the benefits of those is they say it makes it more accurate because it gives the barrel, if you see here, there's a slight a bit of wiggle room that you have there. I've never had one personally, not yet. I know like BCM, they all their stuff is thermal fit. I do believe that the Centurion CM4 which this one is here. I think they offer them in both, but I'm not sure. The other thing that some people like to do is they like to lap the receiver. I guess there can be some tolerance stacking or some anodizing that keeps the barrel extension from sitting absolutely perfectly true on the face there. I've never done it myself. I've read, some people, there's a debate. Some people say it's not worth it, and some people say it is. But if you wanted to lap the barrel face, there's tools available for them, and now is the time that you would do it. But considering or taking into consideration this type of build where it is slip fit, at this stage, what I would do is go ahead and slide it in and make sure that everything lines up, specifically with the barrel nut. Sometimes you get some built-up anodizing, or there may even be a defect that's going to keep you from being able to thread that on smoothly. So I'll go ahead and just hand thread it on there just to make sure that everything fits the way it should. As you see, it did. Thread it on, no problems at all. At this point, you need to take the barrel back off because it is key at this point that you install some grease, specifically it's the Aeroshell 33M. I can't remember because I'll type it in here in the video. But you want to make sure that you put it on the threads because you have a steel barrel nut, you have an aluminum threads, and then you also have a steel barrel extension. So you want to make sure that you grease up the threads and you grease up the face here where your barrel extension is to prevent any type of galling. So let's go ahead and do that. And actually, before I move on, this is where I'd like to talk about the importance of having a reaction rod when you're tightening down your barrel nut, because you're about to apply, it ranges, I believe the mil spec is from 35 to like 80 foot-pounds of torque. And you have risk of twisting off your barrel extension. You have risk of shearing off your alignment pin here. So as you see inside your barrel, where you've got your lugs, once you slide on the receiver, these grooves in the receiver rod will engage with those, and on top of that, when the receiver slides on, this fin slides into where your charging handle goes and holds everything nice and tight. So I have used the bev block before. You saw in the early ones, it's not usually sometimes the most stable, but I have done it successfully. But in this case, like I mentioned, this is the first time that I've gotten one of these Midwest Industries upper receiver rods, and it's definitely going to make it a lot more stable. So the grease, Aeroshell 64 to 33 ms. This is what the manual calls out for, or the TDP. So this is where I'll just go ahead and take a little bit of an acid brush here. This little container I got on Amazon. I want to say it's a 1/2 ounce container. I got this a couple years ago, and I've done a couple builds with it. I think it costs like 10 bucks or something like that. So I'm going to go ahead and apply some of that Aeroshell to these threads. You don't have to gob it on, but you definitely want to make sure that you get some on there to prevent any type of galling. Go ahead and put that to the side because I am going to go ahead and use that again when it comes time to put the castle nut on the lower receiver. Get a little bit more on there. All right, go ahead and slip in. I see a little bit of excess here. I'll go ahead and take that out from the inside. I'm going to slide on the barrel in, twist on the castle nut by hand. You see there's some excess grease, but we'll clean that up when we're done. We're going to slide on the upper receiver and the barrel into the upper receiver, the URR. Gets locked on there nice and tight. So now we're going to move on to seasoning the threads and torquing the barrel itself. All right, so I mentioned earlier my Midwest Industries armor's wrench. It does have a side on here for attaching a mil-spec barrel nut, and along with a 1/2 inch slot for attaching a torque wrench into it. This is not a mil-spec barrel nut. It is specific for the Handguard. Many Handguards out there nowadays, they are going to have specific barrel nuts, and the majority of them, unless you're Geisley, will come with their own barrel nut tool. So as you see here, or when it comes to mil-spec barrel nuts, like I mentioned, the actual TDP has a pretty wide range to it. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but from what I've gathered over the years, you are definitely better going more so on the lower side of the torque than the higher side of the torque. This one here specifically, Midwest tells you to torque to 40 foot-pounds, so that's what we're going to go ahead and do. I typically just follow whatever the manufacturers say, regardless of what any of my preconceived notions or experience may tell me. One thing about when you're using a torque wrench, let me position this right so you can actually see it. You want to make sure that you're engaging it at a 45-degree angle and that you're not straight on like this. In order to get the correct torque value, you want to hold it at a 45, such as that. So additionally, on top of that, one of the things and the benefits to having a barrel nut that does not have the teeth on it, sometimes you run into issues where you can't get the clearance in between the teeth to get your gas tube through there, and you have to work towards torquing it and retorquing it, breaking it loose and retorquing it in order to get line up. Very simple with these nuts that are exclusive. They don't have those teeth. You don't have to get them timed correctly. Once you just get it torqued, you're good to go. All right, now that I've repositioned and given myself some room, you're going to use your tool, line it up on the teeth, make sure that you're square, and go ahead and torque it to the 40 foot-pounds. Once it clicks, you want to go ahead and break it loose. All right, had to reposition one of the C-clamps that are holding down my drill bench vise here, or drill press vise. One of the downsides of not having a real vise, but it's what I have to work with. All right, so torquing it and retorquing it is something that you need to do to season the threads, and is a very important step. You need to do it 3 times. Well, technically you're going to torque 3 times, you're going to break it loose twice. So that was one. You're going to break it off, thread it back on, torque wrench reset back up. All right, that was number 2. All right, and this will be the last one for number 3 and the final torque. All right, and that's it. 3 times the charm, 40 foot-pounds for this barrel nut anyways. All right, so next step, I'm going to go ahead and install the gas tube. This one here is a Sons of Liberty Gunworks melanite coated tube. These only go in one way. You obviously have the end that goes into the receiver, picks up the BCG, and then you have the opposite end, which will pick up the gas block on the gas port, and then you have your roll pin hole right here. So you can just slide that into the receiver. Make sure that you have it lined up the right way with the gas port facing down before you install the roll pin. You couldn't really install it the other way because of this bend in the tube. But just to double check, if you were installing this, I know some people like to install their gas block before they put the barrel, install the barrel and tighten down the barrel nut. And if that's the case, you can use one of these handy little jigs that holds everything in alignment while you go to drive the roll pin hole in, or the roll pin in. But in this case, since I installed it the other way, it does not quite work that way. So anyway, got that in there. Go ahead and use my bev block again to stabilize the other side. Find your hole. Take my pin, get a little tiny little bit of oil on there, just to make the installation a little easier. So definitely went in a lot easier. The gas tube roll pins typically aren't too difficult. I do want to finish it off with my roll pin. Let's get my roll pin. Make it nice, even on both sides, protrude it out just a little bit. That's about good. And there you have it. Gas tube installed. All right, so next up, we're going to go ahead and install the handguard. And this might be an unnecessary step, but considering that I've been handling that barrel quite a bit with my hands and my sweat, before I install the handguards, I do like to go ahead and take some COP and just go ahead and wipe it down a little bit, just to potentially stave off any type of corrosion or rust that starts to form on there. It'll burn off any excess once you actually start shooting it. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so now moving on to the handguard. With this design here is a one-piece free float rail. Once you slide it onto over your barrel, slide it over the proprietary barrel nut and push it on. As you see here, there's anti-rotation tabs on it, which can keep it from spinning around, though there is a little bit of wiggle room here. Basically, once you put this in, there's a groove in the barrel nut right there that once you attach this in here, it'll land or set in that groove and keep this thing from being able to slide forward or aft. Once you do that, you install these screws to 55 inch-pounds according to the manual. So whenever I install fasteners, I definitely like to use some type of thread locking compound. Besides the thread locker that I discussed before, in this case you wouldn't want to use red. You would want to use a lighter, typically a blue thread locker. In this case I got blue 242. But with this handguard itself, as you see here, it's got aluminum helicoils in it. And from my experience and what I've read, when you have helicoils, like typically you have on the bottom of optics or red dots, you really don't want to use a thread locker. You want to use something more like Vibrotite, which is another type of thread locking compound. The difference between them is the thread locker kind of hardens up into a crust, and Vibrotite kind of stays almost in a soft gooey state. It just does not allow the screws to back out as if they had none on there. When it comes to using Vibrotite, one of the things you do need to do though is that you need to apply some to the threads and then let it dry before you install them. So that ranges from 10 minutes to 30 minutes depending on the temperature in the air. So I'm gonna go ahead and put some on there, and then I'm going to let that set a little bit, and then we'll come back. Also, something I wanted to point out real quick is I noticed that with this handguard here, like I mentioned, you have that piece down in there. You do have a bit of wiggle room where you can set the gap between the handguard and the upper receiver. You don't want it right against it. You do want to have a little bit of a gap in there. Nothing that's too crazy. You can see there's a pretty big variation there. Oops, slipped out of place. That's about as wide as I can go, and then obviously it would let me sit right up against it. So I'm going to kind of split that difference a little bit. There we go. And I'll be back when the thread locker sets up. All right, so now that the Vibrotite is set up a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and install these screws. First I'll do them loose or by hand, just to run them down a little bit till they make contact. Okay. Now I want to check how the alignment is with my upper receiver and the rail itself. You see there's a little bit of room for twist there. One way or another, I don't know how much the camera's catching it up. So I want to square them up as much as possible. One option that you can do, in fact, I'll go ahead and grab it. So one option you can do is if you have a scope mount or another optic, you can use it to clamp and bridge it. But unfortunately, I don't have a free scope mount right now. I was going to try to show it with this magnifier here, but it doesn't have enough footprint to hold it together. But basically, it'll hold it in the alignment that you want it at, both lined up this way and horizontally across the top of the receiver. So in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and eyeball it. Tighten down a little bit. Check it. Still looks pretty good. You want to alternate back and forth to apply equal clamping pressure before you put the torque wrench on it. All right, so these screws, and it's going to vary from handguard to handguard, but the manual that came with this handguard said to torque these to 55 inch-pounds. I'm going to go ahead and do another check to make sure I like the alignment on that, make some adjustment. There you go. The way that looks. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and torque these down. Again, have my Wheeler fat wrench set up at 55, looks like almost 56. Okay. When you torque these down, do one. Get the other, and then just do a double check on the torque. And as you see, they continue to want to, as you tighten one down, the other one gives a little bit more. So you want to do this until they no longer free spin and it goes straight to the torque value click. And that's it. You go right there. Double check your work. Looks pretty good overall. And that's it for installing the handguard. All right, so lastly, I'm going to go ahead and tighten down the A2 birdcage flash hider. I'm going to tell you that if you didn't have a reaction rod such as the URR, you typically wouldn't want to torque this down. This doesn't necessarily get torqued down. Anybody's familiar with the A2 flash hider, there's a flat spot on bottom where there's no slots. You use a crush washer to install it. Don't need any type of thread locking device on there at all. I know some people like to put grease on there. I don't. I've never had an issue getting one off. But if you had something like a suppressor mount, you would not want to use a crush washer because crush washers don't always crush evenly, and it could be slightly off a little bit, and you could risk having baffle strike. So being that's not the case for this, I'm just going to go ahead and tighten it down now. Get it lined up to where they're on the bottom. All right, almost there. All right, that lined up appropriately. Just do a quick check here. My camera might not be able to pick it up so well. Looks like it needs just a little bit more. It's probably about good. Take a look at it. Yep, it's pretty good. Torque to the bottom. All right. You know, one last thing, something that I like to do when I ever have a new AR, and I've just put together a new upper, I'm putting a new bolt carrier group in it. I like to put a little mark or a dimple in the BCG cam pin. Being that you typically always want the pin going in at the same orientation. I know that for Control Design, they already offer some that are come with a dimple in it, and technically, or really, I'm not really putting a dimple in this thing because it is made of such hard material that it doesn't really dimple so much, but at least gives me a little bit of a reference mark. So I'll put it up in my vise here. I'll take one of my punches, my center punches, favor it towards one end, put a little mark. So now I know that when I go to put this back into the bolt carrier group, you know, time in and time out, that once I put it back in, get it lined up. To get it lined back up, I know that I want that dimple facing forward. Like so. So that's about it. I hope you guys got some enjoyment, maybe learned a thing or two from it, but that's pretty much all it takes to assemble an upper receiver from a small box of parts into a complete upper receiver group. In this case, 16-inch Faxon Gunner barrel with a Midwest Industry Slimline handguard, a Centurion Arms CM4 upper receiver group, BCM forward assist, and ejection port cover. And then I'll have in a Sons of Liberty Gunworks phosphate bolt carrier group. And lastly, what did I do with it? Oh, just the standard Expo Arms mil-spec charging handle. So that's all I got. Please, if you liked the video, please like, subscribe, share the channel. Appreciate all the views and the comments that I've been getting. See you in the next one. Lower receiver build.